Well, hello and good evening. I look around and see some faces that I see relatively frequently, so we're becoming familiar. That's great. Welcome to today's Sagan National Colloquium talk. As most of you are aware, the Colloquium theme is, the title is Bite, and the theme is examining the mutually transformative relationship between people and food. The series does continue until November 14th, so there's just a wealth of events and information coming your way until that time. So you can look at the website and other information to see the entire range of speakers and events. My name is Chris Fink, and I'm a faculty member in Health and Human Kinetics here at Ohio Wesleyan University, and I'm the director of the Colloquium. It was always my hope that throughout the series we would be given the opportunity to explore the vast array of ways in which food impacts our lives, and in turn in ways in which we impact food as well. And we will and have explored themes of social, moral, scientific, aesthetic, economic, health, and cultural importance among lots of other areas. And tonight's event is no exception. And in fact, this speaker, we were joking at dinner that she wins the farthest traveled award. Our speaker tonight has traveled all the way from India to share that expertise, and it's just going to be great. I did have one announcement, speaking of India. Students who are interested in studying abroad for a semester in India, actually there's a session this Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. in Smith Date Study, which will outline program options for Ohio Wesleyan students. There'll be a question and answer. And later in the semester, there'll be work about student research and travel in India. So there's a lot of great opportunity there. The OWU Daily will have details if you're interested in that. I'm going to actually introduce our introducer tonight. She's a student here, Caitlin Lentz. She's a senior in Women's and Gender Studies and in Sociology Anthropology. She's a double major from Somerset, Ohio. She serves on both the Women's and Gender Studies and SOAN student boards, is a member of Progress OWU, and if you're not familiar with Progress OWU, that's a student activist organization, and they organize opportunities for students to gain knowledge and hands-on experience in letting voices be heard on a variety of issues that range from politics to public policy to corporate and social issues. After graduation, she plans to attend graduate school and hopes eventually to earn her PhD, and she would like to study gender issues in the field of sociology. Please join me in welcoming Caitlin Lentz.
Tonight I have the great honor of introducing Dr. Anjali Bhatia. Dr. Bhatia is currently an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at Lady Shri Ram College for Women, University Delhi, where she teaches sociology of India, sociology of kinship, sociology of gender, and sociological theory. She earned her PhD at JNU, New Delhi, conducting her research on the fast food eating culture. She combines her studies and passions for sociology of food, family, and everyday life to provide us with an interesting and informative perspective on fast food culture and its role in the lives of youth. I will say that in the very, very brief time that I have known her, I found her wit to make her a very engaging conversationalist and a pleasure to be around. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bhatia.
Thank you very much for a very generous introduction. She makes me look very good. Excuse me, but I will be sitting and talking because we don't want a stand-up comedy show here. I have to manage the computer, that is my PowerPoint, my paper, the mic, and myself. So with you shortly. Okay, let me start by looking at the theme of the colloquium, mutually transformative relation between people and food. For starters, let me say that today, our collective presence here instances the spirit of this theme. On the one hand, this colloquium focusing on food transforms food into food for thought. And on the other hand, our meditations on food transform our relationship from being a bunch of unrelated people hailing from myriad walks of life. We have been transformed into a collective body sharing views about food or stories related to food. And at a personal level, visiting Ohio has been a transformative experience for me. So let me begin by thanking Ohio Wesleyan for inviting me to partake of food for thought, conviviality, and of course, delicious food that I've been having here. Thank you very much for that dinner. So let's go back to the title. And to my mind, we could derive 3 key themes from this title: food, people, transformation. Having flagged these themes, I turn to the title of my presentation, which is Constitution of Childhood and Youth in Fast Food Eating Out Culture, Global Local Dynamics in India. My presentation is based on observations of the food landscape made in New Delhi, the capital city of India, post-1990s, which has been categorized as the post-economic liberalization phase. It was intriguing that on its that on its arrival in India, global corporation McDonald's. Is there anybody here who hasn't heard of McDonald's? Well, it is in the heart of America. It was intriguing that on its arrival in India, McDonald's ushered in what I call the fast food eating out culture. There was something new as well as something different about this culture. Part of the newness was not about food. For instance, there were elements such as branding, restaurant chains, supply chains, media advertisements, promotional campaigns, standardized restaurant designs, birthday party services, play areas, Ronald McDonald shows, and young boys and girls in part-time employment, and target consumers. All of this has got nothing to do with food. And yes, McDonald's also had some things to do with food. But when it came to McDonald's, one couldn't just say food. It had to be food and technology, food and machines, the market, the supply chains, food processing, a kitchen which was practically only a space for assembling the burger, not cooking, quick delivery. So McDonald's, I thought, these were my initial observations. There is so much which is not to do with food here. And how am I going to understand this? I would like to share with you as to how was this fast food model, how was this received in India, or what kind of a reception did McDonald's have in India? Well, McDonald's model was adopted selectively by eateries. 2, people took to McDonald's enthusiastically. And 3, it spurred some kind of protest by the Hindu right-wing activists. These protests did not lead to much, but nonetheless, they were symbolic. So in this way, a global local context was created. Because here was McDonald's and there were local reactions. Global elements got involved with local elements. My next question is that how do my observations conducted in India bear upon the three key terms we have identified? First, when I look at McDonald's and the key term of food, well, as far as McDonald's is concerned, food here is not food. It is fast food. People, the second term, people are clients. Further, McDonald's categorizes these clients as target consumers. If you've seen ads, if you've seen the promotional campaigns, if you've seen the products, then clearly through all of these media, via all of these media, McDonald's creates categories of target consumers. And this is why I say people are no longer just people, they become consumer categories of youth, child, so forth and so on. I'm going to be talking about youth and child. And interestingly, not only are people transformed into consumer categories, but they are also assigned or associated with a distinctive way of life. Let's look at the third term, transformation. My observations bear out that transformation is effected at different levels when it comes to McDonald's in India. Food into fast food, people into consumer categories, and thirdly, a transformation at the level of the relation between fast food and consumer categories. Having said that, I want to make this point very sharply, that when we talk about transformation, it would be naive to spare transformation a critical scrutiny. For are not transformations fraught? Are they not tension-ridden, welcomed, contested, resisted, defeated? Well, what I'm trying to say is that it is vital to be alert to the sociocultural context within which transformations take place. There is no term like transformation without a context. And this point is very important for me because I'm going to be looking at what happens when global meets local in a particular context and what kind of transformations are affected by that. In other words, I'm suggesting that the story about people, food, and transformation would be very different for different societies. For instance, the McDonald's story in America would be very different from the McDonald's story in India. And I'm here to tell the McDonald's story from India. And in a way, and I think this is the aim of my presentation too, in a way, I want to transmute this fact of difference. So when I just said difference between societies and cultures, I want to transmute this fact of difference between cultures into an article of faith when we deal with other cultures, when we meet people of other cultures. So difference, respect for difference, I argue, would be an article of faith undergirding my presentation. So I think in a way I have said what I had to say. But let me just tell you the McDonald story from India. My examination of the fast food eating out culture serves as an occasion to witness a global process and a particular society's articulation with this process. And in this particular society I'm talking about, I maintain that McDonald's is not just a purveyor of food and drinks, but it purveys modernity. And how should that be? It encourages new forms of sociality and new forms of family relations. So it purveys modernity of relationships. And I want to reiterate here, so when we talk to McDonald's, I'm not talking about food, nutrition, health. I'm talking about some other things which food is not about. Some other things which I could read in the fast food culture. This development that McDonald's purveys modernity is what I interpret as the constitution of youth and childhood in fast food eating out culture. This is the way I grasp it. Furthermore, this constitution, I argue, is an expression of the interplay between the global and the local. Also, this interplay is explained by the tension between tradition and modernity. Let us now demonstrate the constitution of childhood and youth in fast food eating out culture, which is the substance of my paper. And it's important that we keep in view that when we talk about childhood or youth, these entities are actually drawn from the family. And it is important to look at these developments because these entities which are drawn from the family are constituted as consumer categories in a way that they appear to have nothing to do with the family, as if the child or childhood is a separate entity, it merits its own culture, as if the child is an autonomous thing, as if youth is an autonomous entity. So does it mean that when we see these kind of autonomous categories in consumer culture, in fast food eating out culture, in ads, in media, are we to believe that this is an indication of change in family relations or change in traditional forms of sociality? That is the important question. Let me look at childhood to answer this question, maybe, or try to answer this question. Now, if you look at the scholarship, social science scholarship, then very clearly in the context of Indian society, scholars have argued that traditionally child is not a separate category and that childhood does not exist. This is because society does not assign importance to this stage as the child is finally integrated into society. This is the traditional view. In globalizing India, however, the signals appear contrary. child appears as an independent category. It claims its distinctive culture on account of involvement in multiple agencies, such as market, media, so many ads in which child figures with no one around. It's a separate category for the state, because here I'm showing you an ad which has been issued by the Delhi police regarding child worries, violence in school, ragging, isolating issues as if they were only related to children. This is a very interesting image of a newspaper front page that on the day of the elections, national elections, when the government took over, right after that news, right below that is the news of performance in examinations. I think it's a very telling instance of how important or how children's culture, children's involvement in schools has been singled out. The same trend, I think, holds in McDonald's, where the child is targeted as a consumer and then treated as if it was separate and autonomous. These are some of the flyers which tell us that the child is targeted as a consumer through rewards for performance in school, through birthday party services, through art competitions that are organized by McDonald's for children, through the restaurant ambience, through dedicated play areas, merchandise for children. Happy Meal. And finally, through the mascot, Ronald McDonald, who extends a friendly hand to children. And these photographs I clicked of a Roland McDonald show that is held in the McDonald restaurants in Delhi and in India generally. And it was intriguing for me that the game Ronald was playing with children was to he was organizing a shouting competition, a screaming competition. So you can see in this image, the boy is actually screaming, and this boy won the first prize for screaming. Well, this is something that does not happen with families, in families. So all of it is to, well, woo children. I'm going to just show you this. It's a television commercial. Sorry about that. I thought this is absolutely significant for a culture in which the family is a very important unit within which the child belongs, to have somebody, a mascot, who befriends the child. Well, the point I'm making is that in this fast food culture, the child is shown, or it's made out to be an entity which is separate. The same holds in case of McDonald's, where the child is targeted. Okay, I've told you about this. Now let us look at some of the eating practices. And I've tried to classify eating practices during my research. And the eating practices are also, I find them to be child-centric. That is, parents would tell you that children pester them with requests to go to McDonald's. And these practices could be classified as going to McDonald's, which would be just like that. You just want to go there. Treating children as, kind of a reward for performing well at school, or just doing your homework on time, or celebrating birthdays. So how are we to understand this appearance of the child as a category in fast food eating out culture? Is it because children have pester power? No. Ultimately, you have to pay for all of these services. Children don't earn. So is it because children have pester power? No. Is it because McDonald's has instituted children as separate categories? No. On the contrary, child-centered eating practices could be understood in the context of the aspirational Indian society, and how McDonald's serves as a context to meet these aspirations. Parents give into the demands of children because they use going to McDonald's as treats or incentives for a good performance at school. So it is not, so if you see child as a category, it's not because of the global power of McDonald's. It is neither the pester power of children. It is somewhere in between. It is explained by an articulation between parental aspirations, whereby success in life is sought via education leading to a lucrative career, and its realization in a global consumerist culture. Well, I'm just saying that you have to understand these child-centric practices as an articulation of the global and the local. It is not only about McDonald's. It is not only about the consumer. It is how the global fits into the local. And this is what I call the global-local dynamic. And I could see this in the fast food culture. In a similar vein, I would very quickly examine the constitution of youth in fast food culture. Now, traditionally, youth does not exist as a life cycle category. But in globalizing India, it is grabbing the attention of media. I'm showing you, these are the covers of India Today magazine. It is grabbing the attention of media, the market. In fast food culture in particular, youth are configured as a workforce comprising students who are part-time workers or part-time employees, and all of these developments are very new for India. I think a part-time employment in which girls and boys would flip burgers is something very common in America, but in India this is something very new, to have girls and boys working in restaurants, in mixed groups. So McDonald's actually pioneered this in a sense, configuring youth as a workforce on the one hand, comprising part-time employees, and on the other hand, clients who would hopefully hang out in these restaurants. And when we say they are promised modernity, they are promised a distinctive lifestyle, I'm basically looking at, how these restaurants where, well, nobody asks you to leave, even if you were to just sit there and spend endless hours talking. I think this is something very new, a very new model for restaurants and public dining places where girls and boys could actually just sit and talk to each other and intermingle. And all these developments are very new for Indian society. So this is my first observation regarding youth, that they are configured through work as well as leisure or pleasure. Secondly, it says you can work and study. This is a first for India in a sense. So you have employees as well as clients. My next observation is that in the fast food culture, youth are not a homogeneous category. Youth is differentiated on the basis of sex. I'm going to show you some slides here, and then basically just perhaps comment on what I mean by differentiated on the basis of sex. Youth are conceptualized as males and females. So now we have switched to the register of sexuality. Okay, I'm going to look at the construction of a certain kind of a construction of female sexuality, especially which is very evident in the hiring of girls as hostesses. And this is the, hiring kind of a flyer, that this is what the girl needs to be: fun-loving, energetic, fond of kids, such and such years of age. Well, this is quite radical for India. And somebody said, I won't obviously disclose who this person is, a very high up, a manager in McDonald's. I asked him, why do you want girls in your restaurants? Considering India is that particular kind of a culture where girls, traditionally they don't work in public restaurants. Well, he said that, all these things. So what I'm saying is that youth is, yes, differentiated. Girls are hired, to my mind, for a certain kind of sexual labor, to shape the experiences of the males, because, well, they are not really, if they are used to attract customers, it is not only about work, it is not only about labor, it's a kind of a sexual labor they are made to do. We don't have time to get into these issues of construction of sexuality and gender here, but I've just simply flagged them. So if you look at the overall picture, we have, if you were looking at the representation of youth in McDonald's, very clearly there is a mixing of sexes. Number one, there is a sexualization of the youth. They are males and females. Then there is a mixing of these sexes, which is something which is not traditional to Indian society, or traditionally acceptable in Indian society. Thirdly, they are also kind of provided avenues for romance, conducting romance and conducting courtship. These are some of the flyers. I mean, clearly it's not only about the ice cream cones. It is, it's the male gaze looking at pairs, which is suggestive of the idea of a couple of romance. You could read it differently, but that's the way I read it. Fine. Now let's do some reality check. Is the reality of young people in India the same as or identical to what is depicted or what appears in the fast food eating out culture? I could tell you no, straight away. Lives of young people are not about, courtship or romance traditionally. It's very different from the way American society is. It is very different from the way young people live in America. I'll explain this shortly. The reason why we find young people actually frequenting McDonald's as clients or as part-time employees are very different. It's not for pleasure, entirely. I would say that it is to do with, they are there to celebrate the end of exams sometimes. They are celebrating the last day of schools and colleges. They are there out treating friends. So all of these things, if you were to celebrate the end of exams, if you were to celebrate the last day at school by treating yourself to food, I would look in the direction of education and the pressures associated with education, or the pressures of education. Because if you celebrate the end of something, there must be something to celebrate about. It's an end or a temporary reprieve from an everyday pressure. So I read these treats at McDonald's, these outings at McDonald's, as pointing to education, the kind of pressure students experience. Secondly, if you look at the part-timers, from a remove, it might seem very cool to be working at McDonald's, or it would be a very done thing. But in case of India, I've spoken with some of these people, and they are working in McDonald's to make ends meet. So it means that just about any young person who just needs pocket money will not go and work. There is a class profile of people who would go and take up these part-time jobs. Not only class profile, there is a caste profile of people who would go and take up these jobs. So they are there to, make ends meet. And you know that India is governed by, work in India is governed by a caste-based hierarchy. So everybody will not go and work in McDonald's, because if you're working there, you have to do everything, which includes cleaning the toilets also. In India, that is not acceptable to somebody who belongs to, any caste but the lowermost one. These people are also there supporting their education. So I would like to say that youth is the reality of youth in India is different from what is projected or represented in the fast food eating out cultures. Though fast food cultures offer avenues of forging relationships with the opposite sex, though they encourage romance, but this is seldom realized. They don't translate into enduring relationships. These are very short-lived reprieves touch and go. And the reason for this is that in India, parents are very vigilant about their children's lives. There is a great deal of control that is exercised by parents on, on children's lives. And even if you were to ask young people in India, let us say, about the choice of marriage, they would say, well, we would like to do what our parents tell us. We would like to go for a marriage which is arranged for us by our parents. So that is the reality of India. I mean, that is very different from the way it works in fast food culture, which is which is an American model, where the girl is glamorous and the boy is sporty and cool, and it's not like that. It is certainly not like that. So, well, in conclusion, I'd like to say that global processes external to a culture cannot transform it completely, because societies or cultures impose limits on external influences through their conditions, through their internal conditions, as well as cultural filters. So the global process is represented by McDonald's. Yeah, people enjoy McDonald's, they enjoy going to McDonald's, but they're not transformed completely. I haven't even touched upon the food aspects of McDonald's. I'm talking about some other kind of cultural strains and cultural currents which McDonald's carries. And I've tried to, in a sense, capture those cultural currents in terms of forms of relationships, forms of sociality. But clearly, societies, these currents, they don't transform societies, because there is a tenacity about societies and cultures, and they impose the limits, as I said, through filters of culture. So in the end, I'll just reiterate something which I have already stated to be the aim of my presentation, which is, cultures are different, and let us understand this, and let us respect this. Thank you very much.
If people have questions or points of comment for Dr. Bhatia, this would be a great time to, we have plenty of time to address those.
Do you find that this fast food culture is affecting the health and, like it does here in America, like we have such an obesity problem here. Do you see that happening in India?
Very good question. Surprisingly, there is a discourse, there is a concern related to health, but only, I would say, that would be, in a sense, to even have that concern is a luxury in a society where everybody doesn't have food to eat, or where there is very little food to be shared between a vast population. It's a luxury to be concerned about your health, yes. So, well, the people who go to McDonald's, I would say, yes, they are concerned about health, but the whole point, the point I'm making is that they don't see McDonald's food as junk food. In a sense, I mean, there is something which is more attractive about McDonald's, which overrides the food. That's why I didn't talk too much about food, because it is seen as a kind of a symbol of modernity, a symbol of America, Americana. So I'm sure, so it's like this, okay, we'll go to McDonald's, but that is, you don't think about health then. You're going there for something completely different. But paradoxically, the same set of people they could be very concerned about their child's health and, try to give a healthy, nutritious food to the child. And when that doesn't work, they say, okay, if you do your homework, we'll take you to McDonald's. Now, how do you make sense of that? So I would say there are competing discourses, of health. And to my mind, in a sense, McDonald's has not generated that kind of an anxiety related to health amongst most people. It is maybe, I think gradually it will, but I have done my research, when McDonald's just came in, that is in 1996. So I was looking at Delhi, around 2000, 2005, at least that was not very prominent then. But there's a paradox there.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious, you have kind of laid out a model in which most consumers in this cycle of McDonald's are one-time or special event or occasional consumers. Is there a different model for people who are more daily consumers, or is that simply not a category that is in the Indian experience of McDonald's?
A daily consumer is not a category. It fits into a kind of secular occasion, not a religious ritual occasion, like a weekend thing it could be. That's why I said, the practices, I can categorize them as minor occasions for children, treats, rewards, just going for an outing. I think it's not an everyday thing. I would doubt it, yeah.
I guess I was just wondering, you're saying that McDonald's is relatively new, and you think after a generation there will be any impact on the culture, or? Sorry, after a generation of McDonald's being there, will the new youth that's working there now have any impact on the general culture?
Well, I think I can see a change already. It's gradual, but India is work in progress. I mean, as all societies are work in progress. The change I see is that initially, the lower classes, McDonald's is now an aspirational thing for lower classes. So initially, in the first go, I think everybody, was attracted to McDonald's, but now it is people from, smaller towns more. It's an aspirational thing for them. So that is a change. In a sense, a different class of people are seeing it as an aspirational symbol, or something that is the change. But what kind of an impact it has on youth? I don't think that it is going to be what we see represented in the fast food culture. I don't think so, because there is, as far as intermingling of the sexes of girls and boys is concerned, I think the values are intact. More or less, and it would take a long time for them to be shaken. There might be changes. So when people talk about change in India, I think we are talking about a very thin social slice of India. Very few, 3%, but that is not India really. And I think one has to be very cautious in using the term India when we talk about economy or anything else. It's uneven, I would say. And I don't see it coming close to this model for most of India, maybe pockets. And I think these thin slices are also, those people who have global contact, people who move around. They travel, they have jobs, they are in certain multinational jobs, who communicate across cultures. but not most of India.
Can you talk more about the sexual gratifications provided from female workers in India?
It's not, when you talk about sexualization, there are, different, I'm not talking about sexual gratification. I'm talking about the work you are made to do. If you're going to hire me because it attracts men, then you're hiring me not for sexual gratification in a sense, but you're hiring me for a certain kind of, a gaze, or, it's very intangible, but it's a different kind of work. And it also creates an atmosphere of, which is a modern, cool atmosphere. Because this is not something which is this is not the done thing in India. It hasn't been. And when I just mentioned that there were some protests by the Hindu right-wing activists, even though they were symbolic, I mean, the days on which they were vandalizing the pet properties of fast food, restaurants, these were Valentine's Days, because symbolically the Valentine's Day threatens Indian culture, in a sense where girls and boys, give each other cards, or they meet each other, or it suggests, it encourages a certain kind of, sociality between girls and boys. Yeah.
McDonald's is obviously a huge company. It's worldwide, and it has, it has to make a lot of money to keep going, obviously. And so, obviously, in my opinion, I think that they employed the idea of using women at the counters and that type of thing to draw in more customers, obviously, to keep their company going. But is that one of the reasons that the Indian people don't like McDonald's there? Or I'm just confused as to how it relates in the eyes of the Indian people to why McDonald's, does that sort of thing.
No, I think people go. People go. It's not that they don't like seeing girls and boys. Some may not like it, but people go in families, people go in groups. But I could answer your question by taking it from another perspective. Let me take the perspective of a girl who works in McDonald's. Maybe that'll answer your question. McDonald's is a neighborhood kind of a restaurant. It's in many parts of Delhi. It's all over. But I was interviewing some of these girls who were working in McDonald's, which is in the heart of Delhi, the Connaught Place, and I asked them, where do you stay? And they gave me an address which was very, very far away from Connaught Place. So I said, but why would you, travel all the way? Because you could work in a neighborhood McDonald's, if you have to work. So the answer was, that, there are neighbors. And it would invite a lot of, what do I say? It's not acceptable, that a girl would work in a restaurant like this. So I think I hope I've answered some bit of your question, So there are these currents there. And if I were to ask someone, I think this is not the question I've asked anyone, do you like girls working there or you not like working there? But I think you have to read a culture. I don't see any sense in somebody traveling 26 kilometers every day, commuting by bus in a city in which there is very thick traffic. It takes a long time. It doesn't make sense, other than the fact that you don't want to be, you don't want to be recognized by your neighbors, or Sure. I mean, I think that's the first kind of a challenge, McDonald's. They did research before they came to India in 1996, and 4 or 5 years of research. And one of the things they did was to have a vegetarian menu, and remove. They don't have beef on the menu. They don't have pork, I guess. They have chicken and lamb and fish. And they're also catering to, I guess, the food is spicier there. And the third thing is that the burgers they use oil in the burgers because Indians like hot food. So if you keep the oil there, if you have the oil in the burger, it retains the heat for a longer time. I think they don't use oil in other burgers. So in terms of menus, they have a lot of innovation. I mean, that they are very ready to do. They'll do anything to invite the, Indian palate in a sense. So those are some of the things I can think of, yeah. But thank you for the question. And thank you for being here. Well, any more? Well, these needn't be questions. They could be comments and observations, comparable, observations from here. That would help me learn a lot more too.
You talked a lot about part-time jobs for the youth, and I was wondering if there are any labor laws concerning for minors, how many hours a week they're allowed to work, or if that was an issue.
Well, there are labor laws, but I think this is also a part-time workforce, is also a flexible workforce. These are not permanent employees. So I think that is part of the reason why they invite students, as part-timers. Because I think for them a very different set of rules and laws they may not be in place. But clearly there are legislations against child labor, but these people don't fit into that category. They are 18 to 25 or something. Yeah. I mean, though very clearly a McDonald's restaurant says that it's an equal opportunity employer. Those things I have seen there. And sexual harassment will be, something. They have laws about those things. Yeah. There are various ways of reading these developments. I have employed a certain kind of a lens. I have read into this relationships. You could read into them labor. The same data can be read variously. You could see the young boys and girls as labor force. I think economists would do that. They would not hear of, what sexualization and all. It's not really. So you can use the same data for different things. This is about labor, depending upon how you see it. If I want to do a gender analysis of this, I would see it differently. As a sociologist, I would see it differently. If you're for nutritionists, you would see it very differently. If you're concerned with health issues, you would see it very differently. If you're looking at, what does not figure in my research is obviously production issues. There is a whole story to be told there. How do they source the material? What is it doing to agriculture? What kind of contracts do they have with farmers? What is happening to the crops? What kind of patents? There are several issues which I have not touched in my in this research. I was looking, not so much. Mine is a post-production analysis. We are already in the restaurant, we are already in the promotional, we are in the promotions, we are in the advertising, we are in the consumption aspects, we are in the employment aspects. But there's a story there which many people have, they talk about production aspects. And I think you could take a reality from any corner. Mine is just a little bit of it. But my aim clearly was, to basically bring to you a view from India, because I was thinking, I gave it a thought as to what should be the title or topic or theme of my presentation today. Because when it comes to food, one can talk about just anything and so much. But I chose McDonald's because the story, half the story is known to you, because it comes from here to there. So I think it just makes, it's good for me that you know the story already. So I cannot actually, it's easier to build upon a story which is already there. So.
Do you think that India's culture was already sort of going towards this change and McDonald's marketing sort of took advantage of it? Or do you think that McDonald's marketing actually changed the culture of India? And also, is McDonald's the only fast food restaurant?
No, we have all now. We have all, whatever I see here, I mean, we have KFC, you have McDonald's, you have Pizza Hut, you have, I think now Starbucks is, it might have, I think they've also landed there. I think we have good many of them. So as for your question, it's a good question. And I think my last slide, or the second last one, pretty much answers your question that if there is change, it is not only because of an external factor. It cannot be. I mean, here we are talking about cultures and we are talking about civilizations. So there has to be some changes in the internal conditions of societies themselves. So it's not that India, I mean, people are, getting educated in India. They are more open to ideas. There is media. Media is also a very important flow in a sense, cultural flow. It connects cultures. So there is media, there is finances crossing borders, there are people crossing borders, there is capital crossing borders. I mean, the McDonald's story is also a story of capitalism. It's also a story of global capitalism. So you have finance, you have capital, you have media, you have people, you have also, the impact of climate change, I would say. I mean, so many things are crossing borders today. So when we talk of change, it's very difficult, and I would not risk really saying that this is one thing which brings about a change. Two things, or more than two things, more than one things, sometimes they articulate in a way that, change is produced, or it is reiterated, or it is enabled. I mean, for instance, sometimes, to give you a very everyday example, there could be tension between two people in a family. Let's say an outsider comes. So sometimes talking to each other, happen to talk. Is out. So it's like that. You never know what is happening internally, how and in what way does an external influence really fit into an internal culture. It's a difficult question, but I think it cannot be just one of the things. It has to be the two or more. Well, more questions, comments? Yes. Hi, Paul.
In addition to fast food, how much do you see this as a process of
Yes, thank you. I think to answer your question, I'll just say one or two things before I get to the question. I mean, a lot of this has happened post-90s, where post-liberalization, this also must be placed beside the demography, the demography of India, which says that there is so many million middle class households, or some kind of a calculation. Now, I think consumer culture, we were talking about, when we do, the classical Marxian theory, we talk about class formation at the site of production. Production becomes the site of class formation in a sense, relations of production. And I think consumption is, I could say that on the basis of my observations, that consumption is a very important site to talk about this middle class formation. So there is a consumerist culture that is tied to a certain kind of a class formation in India. And this class formation cannot be understood in terms of production relations. It can be understood in terms of lifestyle and in terms of consumption. So, I don't know whether I've answered your question, but consumption has emerged post-90s with increasing wealth and increasing global exposure and a certain kind of, a modernity which gets attached to consumption because of brands coming in and because of products coming in from different markets. So consumption, I would say, we have to watch consumption as a site of class formation, as a site of inclusions, as a site of exclusions, also as a site of, the shape of politics. Because if people, let's say, choose, if you get one day off from work to vote on the day of national election, let us say, on a Friday. And if people take off for the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for a vacation. So I think then something has to be said about the relation between middle class and politics also, and consumption. That you rather just go and, have your vacation, and politics is no longer your concern. So I guess we have to watch that side, yes. I would agree with you there, and we have to, and it's also more so because it's become, it's a device for exclusions. I mean, because if you're defining yourself, you're identifying yourself on the basis of what you can consume, and which has got not much to do with use or need, then certainly there is that X factor. There is an X, the surplus. What kind of a capital it is? What kind of a symbolic capital it is? I guess we have to explain it coming from different societies. Well, a couple of more questions. I would like to earn my dinner, please. I've had a great dinner and great time at Ohio.